Test 1, test 2. Test 1, test 2. Test 1, test 2.
When it's red, it's hot.
Testing, testing. Testing, testing, testing. Here's me when I'm right about here. Okay. So the flat top.
I just lost my good moment of saying good evening. I'm Reverend Laura Murphy, and I was with Aldersgate United Methodist Church here in Lee Summit about a month ago, and I shared a message about leaving a legacy. And we talked a lot about how to impact people's lives, but how we spend time with them, how we pour into them, how we invest into them. And I had promised that if you would like to further the conversation, that I would return and we could talk about how to leave a lasting legacy through our financial means, how to leave a financial legacy to our friends, our family, our community, our churches, and those places that mean so much to us. So I've returned, and I have brought with me this evening David Atkins, who is the president of the Missouri United Methodist Foundation. And as a representative of the foundation, I myself have information to share with you, but David has a wealth of information to share. And David, I'd like you to start this evening by introducing yourself and telling us just a little bit about what the foundation does here in Missouri.
Well, very good. Thank you, Laura, and it's wonderful to be with you, both here at the Aldersgate United Methodist Church and all the folks at home. The foundation is really a resource for the Aldersgate United Methodist Church and the some 750 other United Methodist congregations across Missouri. Tonight we're going to talk about just some very practical topics related to everything from basic estate planning to basic stewardship issues and topics. But the foundation is really a tremendous success story that all Methodists in Missouri can be very proud of. The foundation began back in 1967 and was really envisioned as being sort of the community foundation for the community of United Methodists across our state. And fast forward over 50 years, and the foundation continues to grow in size and services. Today, the foundation administers over $100 million in church assets, and as part of those assets are endowments and plan gifts and church funds, providing ministry grants and scholarships for seminary students and Methodist undergraduate students, and just a whole host of as I say, resources that hopefully help local churches be better and help local pastors really grow their skills in a number of ways. And so just lots to learn about regarding the foundation by itself. You can learn about the foundation at the website, which is mumf.org. That's the Missouri United Methodist Foundation.org. I'm delighted to be here this evening with my colleague Laura, who is the statewide director of development for the foundation. And Laura, I'll hand it back to you to kick us off.
Well, wonderful. Well, you know, thinking about having an evening of talking about a topic that many people don't often want to bring up and discuss, but is so vital and so important when we think about the best way to bless our loved ones. I know that we kind of came up with three things that we were going to hit on today. If I got them right, it's new tax rules. And now, doesn't that sound exciting? But actually, it really is. You've got some good things to share about that and some new opportunities, as well as estate planning basics. And we are going to make sure that people leave tonight with a good knowledge of what they need to have for their wills and for their estates, and also some creative gifts, how we can really leave a legacy with a variety of different means to leave those gifts. And I want you to know that tonight, as David and I speak with you, we are Christians sharing our ideas and information to other Christians. We are not here to sell anything. We are here to enlighten and to inform. And I hope that those of you that are at home, that if you are watching with us live, that you will be able to let us know if you have any questions. You can go right into the chat, leave questions for us of what you might have, and we have somebody monitoring that, and we will answer your questions as we go along. But David, those tax rules, they're new, they're exciting, and that might be really a great way to kick things off today. Tell us what they are and why it's important that we know about them.
Well, again, as with many topics tonight, we're going to try to avoid the weeds and just hit the high points. But the new tax rules kicked in 2018, and so we've had a couple of opportunities to practice. A lot of these rules are in place at least through 2025, and so we really need to kind of wrap our arms around those rules, because that is the way good stewards make the most of their charitable giving each year. And specifically, what we want to highlight about the new tax rules is front and center as far as the charitable giving conversation goes, as well as the tax-wise giving, is how to manage our deductions. Tax deductions save us money. We don't have to pay as much in tax if we take deductions. Under the new rules, there's basically a large individual standard deduction, or a larger deduction for a married couple. And that deduction was hugely enlarged with the new tax rules, to the point where all the people who used to itemize, a lot of those people have stopped itemizing deductions. It's really a choice between taking the standard deduction or itemizing. And that's still a conversation today, and we'd like to just highlight a couple of ways that you might consider, as far as charitable giving goes, to maximize itemized deductions at least every so often, and then the rest of the time take the standard deduction. Specifically, the basic deduction for an individual in 2020, so for the 2020 tax year, is $12,400. For a married couple, you double that, so $24,800. If you have itemized deductions, which are primarily charitable deductions, mortgage interest deductions, medical expense deductions, or state and local tax deductions that exceed that amount, then you should itemize. If those itemized deductions do not exceed that standard deduction, then you are better off taking the standard deduction. And a lot of people, especially if they've paid off their house, really do not reach a level where itemization exceeds the standard deduction. So that simplifies the process, but kind of disincentivizes some of the more familiar itemized deductions. There are a couple of ways that you might consider every so often doing some charitable giving to get you above the standard deduction so you can itemize. And a real useful tool for that is the donor advised fund. A donor advised fund can be set up at the foundation. It can be set up at a community foundation. It can be set up at the charitable arm of a lot of the national brokerage houses, Fidelity or Schwab or Vanguard. But a donor advised fund is a charitable fund that you create. You make gifts into that fund, and then you continue to advise on that fund to do your charitable giving. And to make a long story short, the way you use a donor advised fund is to periodically put a big gift in there. Let's say you have a chunk of stock that has gone up in value since you've owned it. Well, that can be a real good asset to use for charitable giving. But let's say its total value is $50,000. You can throw that into your donor advised fund, and that's a big itemizable deduction for that tax year. And then over the next 2 or 3 years, you can do all of your charitable giving out of your donor advised fund and just take the standard deduction in those years. So it can be a useful tool to get to a more tax-efficient program.
Well, when we talked about coming tonight, we knew that not everybody that would be with us in person or online would be of retirement age, where they would need to really hone in on some of these things. And you might have said, if you have your house paid off, and some people might have panicked and thought, well, then I can't do this. My house isn't paid off. This is for a donor advised fund. Excites me, though, because so many people at so many different levels could get involved with this. And I love that idea that it can also be a family project. Share with a little bit about how it's a family project.
Yeah, a donor advised fund can really kind of be a focal point for your entire family around the charitable giving discussion. In other words, as a family, you can sort of become grant makers. You can assign your children the chore of studying the charities in your community, and assign each child the assignment of finding the charity they really think the family ought to support this year. And they have to make the case to the family why that is. And so it can really be an opportunity to educate your children and the rest of the family about the good work that's being done in your community and how you can get involved in that work charitably.
I think back to when my kids were fairly young, and this would have been such a great learning tool to do with our kids, because it was so important for me to teach them about earning money, but also about how to give and how to get back into the world. And I'm just having visions that I think one of my sons would have found every college football team that he could imagine to be one of the places that he thought we should donate to, a college of choice, and that adds a lot of fun to it. But also,
That's right.
I am sure, there's so many different avenues within our own community, within the world, that could really make a difference. So that donor advised fund is a popular one, and also my understanding is that families together could do this. My siblings and I could do this at this age, and we could come together to do this.
Well, and it's something that can grow over time. For instance, you create a donor advised fund at a foundation because the foundation then invests the fund. And so there is the potential over time that your gifts into your fund are growing, and you can start small. And over time, this can really be an engine generating some very significant giving in your family's name.
I think that's awesome. And this might be a moment, too, that folks that are at home, if you have a question about this or a comment, please put that into the chat and send that to us. If you're watching this later on and you do have questions or comments, do know that we will leave the website information again, and you can always get questions to us in that way. But David, when we come out and we do these kind of conversations, I always find that there's somebody inevitably ask a question about IRAs. And IRAs are definitely for people that are of more retirement age, but explain a little bit about what the benefits are of giving through your IRAs.
Well, the IRA giving is a very interesting opportunity for folks who have reached that golden age when they are required to take a distribution out of a traditional IRA. And back to our deduction discussion, this is a great gift to consider if you do not itemize. If you are taking the standard deduction, then that's a benefit to you. And then if you do your charitable giving out of an IRA, that can also be a benefit to you. In that, if you're old enough to be required to take a minimum annual distribution, you can instruct your IRA administrator to send a distribution directly to your local church or another favorite charity, and it will count toward your minimum distribution amount, but it does not count as income to you. And so it can be a very tax-wise way to give as well. But again, you avoid that whole deduction conversation.
Well, that's interesting, and I'm glad that you've shared with that. I know as a pastor, when I was serving in a church, frequently people would come in with those questions, and they would want to know how to best be able to give from their IRAs, and it was always wonderful to be able to see somebody light up and say, wow, this is a way I can give back, and see it now while they are still alive. And sometimes they would designate it in certain areas, sometimes it was toward the general giving of the church. And so what a wonderful way to be able to use that. So being informed helps tremendously.
Right, and an IRA, I mean, certainly if an IRA it's an individual retirement account, and first and foremost, if a person needs those funds for their retirement, that's certainly the priority. But in many instances, especially folks who started an IRA long ago, many decades ago, an IRA can grow to tremendous size and really be a much larger asset than is needed just for retirement. Wow. And so it can be a wonderful source of charitable giving.
So we've talked a little bit about what families can do. We've talked about what folks that are retired can do, some advantages in those areas. We give a little sampling of a variety of things. Well, the big conversation we want to have amongst all this is estate planning. And I think of young families that don't get around to getting their wills done, and then something tragic may happen, and they aren't able to assign who would be the person that would watch over their children for them. They're not sure where their assets will go. And so I think this is very important for younger folks to pay attention to, as well as people that are older too. You always just think you can wait a little bit longer. We can just wait a little bit longer. But there's some good advantages of planning early. So I know you've got a lot of those ideas. Why don't you share a little bit about estate planning?
Well, and this is a particularly timely conversation in the current moment. Sadly, with the pandemic, we're certainly blessed that it's not a worse disease than it is, but it is, I think, reminding us all of our mortality in a more immediate sense. And certainly, basic estate planning is just one of those life chores that we all must address. And it becomes particularly important, of course, when you have young, dependent children. But really, it is something to take the basic steps on and do periodically throughout one's lifetime. You are exactly right. It is the number one thing people procrastinate about. And consequently, probably the most popular plan is the no plan plan. Oh. And that has a lot of pitfalls, but the state of Missouri and every other state in the union has statutes in place, because if people die without proper planning, something has to be done.
So in other words, if we don't have a plan, the state has a plan for us.
Exactly. And in general, it's not what you would choose, but it gets the job done.
And so we have an opportunity to personalize it with an estate planning, such as wills and trusts.
Exactly.
Okay.
And just some basic, simple plans. Essentially, the kind of keystones of every estate plan are a basic will, a durable power of attorney, and then some form of health care directive. And we'll kind of briefly touch on each of those topics. Some materials that we'll leave here at the church. We actually have a number of printed materials that go into greater detail about some of the topics we're discussing, and you can stop by the church office during the week and pick up this material. They'll be happy to put it in an envelope with your name on it outside the church door. But a couple of very useful items are published by the Missouri Bar Association. One is titled the Probate Law Resource Guide, and is just a real good reference for terminology and kind of getting familiar with wills and trusts and the basic language of that activity. And then the other is a very useful form. It's actually a fillable form. You can find it online and fill it out online or print it out in paper form. And it's a durable power of attorney for health care and a health care directive that can be a very helpful and easy and free resource to use.
And where could folks find that online?
Both of these are available on the Missouri Bar website, and you can download them directly from the website, or like I say, you can print out paper copies or pick them up here at the church.
You know, as you're speaking here, I recently had a conversation with a friend about my age whose parents, they're dwindling in their health and how they can care for themselves, and they do not have those kind of things taken care of. Mm-hmm. And my friend was just kind of poo-pooing it. And I finally said, do you want to be the one to have to make all those decisions, or would you like your parents to make those decisions ahead of time? And it kind of stopped her in her tracks, and she goes, I want them to make those decisions and direct me. So this is kind of a family affair kind of thing, that we need to be able to carefully have these conversations with our loved ones. And when we do it as a heart of a Christian, and we do it out of love and compassion, I think it can really make a difference of end of life and how families handle things. And it's not to be morbid or to have stir up difficult things and emotions with people. It's to create love and to show that we are really loving for that person. And I would say, folks, that as I advised my friend into this as well, you start it with prayer. And God will lead you in a way of having those conversations. But having those materials ready, looking through them ahead of time will probably help people a lot.
It definitely will, and it really is a gift in itself to your children and your loved ones to take these basic steps. A basic will is simply, in its simplest form, it's a statement of how you wish your resources to be distributed amongst your family and loved ones and the charities of your choice. A bequest through a will to your church can be a lovely legacy and can really be something that touches lives in the future. Every church exists, is something of a living legacy as it stands, but through the foundation you can create an endowment. You can endow a scholarship fund for the students coming out of your church. You can endow the building so that that's not a burden on future congregations. You can endow mission activities so that the congregation always has funding to reach beyond the church walls. And so there's just a lot of ways to really think truly long-term about your gifts, about ministry, and ministry in a place that you love.
I've got to make a confession to you today, David, and to folks here at home. My husband and I are working on our wills because when you're in this business, you need to keep up on these things as well. And when we were discussing today about some of the things that we're going to leave in our will, and I said, I'm really excited because I get to teach my kids one more lesson, one more time, and I get to do that in our will because we're choosing to tithe to our church. And when we tithe to the church, I am demonstrating to my children how important that was for me to know that we were giving to the church. I raised my children to be this way, and they're still learning a lot on their own. But I thought I have one more opportunity that I get to teach them, whether that is in a tithe to the church or if we set up an endowment, to let them know that was important to me. And I want them and my grandchildren to be able to see that's important as well. So I think that's a great opportunity for folks. And as a pastor, I have seen it happen and how that does impact families. So I confess.
Exactly.
There you go. Well, how about other ways other than wills? What else can we use?
Well, another very common document that a lot of estates are planned around is a trust, a living revocable trust as the main document. Even if that's your main document, you still need a will. A will is that accompanies a trust is often called a pour-over will. It's a very brief document, but every plan generally keys off the will as the starting point. Now, there are other ways of transferring property outside a will or a trust, and those are referred to as non-probate transfers. And it just simply allows you basically to title a variety of assets in such a way that at your death they automatically the ownership is transferred to the person that you name. And so some combination of a will, non-probate transfers, and a trust, all of the above or just a couple of those can usually handle most estates.
And just touching on those might be things that people are jotting down right now, so I need to look up more information on. Mm-hmm. And those are the type of things that we're here to answer questions for. That if you do have questions now and want us to go in further on that, let us know, as well as they can follow up with emails and such, or contacting their attorney as they set up a will. Because if you do a will online, you don't get to ask a lot of questions because they really don't answer it as much. Right. But a one-on-one contact, investing that time and that money with an attorney really does seem to pay off.
And a basic plan is not a terribly expensive endeavor, and it is important to follow the legal particulars in terms of signing and witnessing the will and things like that. I do think it is a timely topic to talk a little bit about the health care directive conversation. Again, something that it's good to have at any age. And what is reflected in this form are really kind of two parts. One is a health care directive, and that is a statement explaining what you would like to have done under certain circumstances affecting your health care. And particularly in a situation where the prognosis is terminal. It involves your wishes and desires related to life-sustaining treatments, and is really trying to take the burden of decisions off of someone else you may name to make those decisions, and helping them understand what you would want to have done. The other piece of this form is giving that power of attorney, that durable power of attorney, to that person. So in other words, the two parts are the durable power of attorney that gives a person the authority to act on your behalf when you cannot, when you are incapacitated. And the other piece is informing that person and all your caregivers of what your wishes are, what you would like to have done. And so having both of those in writing, properly signed, is just a tremendous help and gift to those people that you are asking to care for you in this way and under trying circumstances, and easily taken care of in advance.
Gift. You use that word again. And this is a gift that we are able to give to our family members and our loved ones, and make it a lasting gift too when we leave a legacy. So there's some lasting legacies that, I mean, in your decades of doing this kind of work, you've had some beautiful examples of lasting legacies. Would you like to share some of those tonight? Because the stories are the very best part of all this.
Absolutely. Well, for instance, a common estate plan for a married couple involves each of the persons having their own trust. And Tom and Laverne Fulton had an estate plan that was based around those twin trusts. And Tom was the first to go, and so during Laverne's lifetime, both Tom's trust and her trust cared for her. And then at her death, the two trusts came together to wrap up the rest of the business, and they left a tremendous gift to the foundation that became the Costner-Fulton Fund for Missions. And it is an ongoing grant program specifically for local church missions across Missouri. The application for those grants is made through the Office of Mission Service and Justice at the Missouri Annual Conference, and it just continues to be a beautiful tribute to a delightful couple, both of whom spent their professional lives. They were actually both on the faculty at the Missouri School of Social Work. They were devoted to the professional practice of social work, as well as being devoted Methodists and devoted mission-minded folks.
Just today, I talked to a pastor that is applying for the one that is coming up due soon here through that fund, and that's something that this church here could apply for. There's a lot of these things that you're going to talk about. They still are affecting churches today after all these years.
Yeah.
I love it.
A second one are the Harmon Fund. Adrian and Margaret Harmon, they had intended to create a fund through their estate plan. They were going to fully fund it through a bequest through their estate. But as time marched on, they decided, well, gosh, we'd really like to see this fund get up and running and doing something while we're still around to enjoy it. And so their vision was a fund that would help the Missouri Annual Conference start new churches. And so they had a large chunk of stock that had gone up significantly in value since they had owned it. And so not wanting to pay the capital gains tax, it made a great gift to just fully fund this fund while they were alive. And sure enough, it began paying out its annual grant making while they were alive, and they got to be present at a couple of new church commissioning ceremonies that had been started with the funds that they provided. But today, that fund, it was originally funded with a little over $600,000. it's paid out about $500,000, and it's currently worth nearly $900,000. So these long-term endowments can be, I often refer to them as Wesleyan engines, in that they earn all they can, they save all they can, and they give all they can each and every year. And it's a powerful tool. And then a final example is Mrs. Stella Cars, who was a devoted member of the Smithton United Methodist Church, which has deep roots in the old German Methodist Church. And her deep-rooted German family had produced a number of Methodist pastors, and she wanted to set up a seminary scholarship fund. She was a very astute businesswoman in her own right, and her estate plan, she left her house. And so her house was the funding asset for her scholarship fund. The house was liquidated, and each and every year we provide $500 awards from the Stella Cars Fund to Missouri seminary students studying to this day, and that's been several years back. So.
Well, we could look at these pictures of these examples,
Yes.
and we see that these pictures were not taken in the last 5-10 years.
That's right.
These are gifts that were thought about a long time ago, that were put into place, and are still to this day leaving a legacy. And my understanding is they have been well invested, so they will continue to be a legacy.
Exactly. That's what the foundation is for.
Well, I also know another spot that people really love to leave a legacy is in scholarship.
Correct.
And so how does that work? What have we seen happen with that in the foundation?
Well, another example, and don't be fooled by some of the antique photos. This scholarship fund is one of our newer scholarship funds. The donor's wedding photo is a little bit antique, but
they're not?
But Gracia Herbert just passed away this year. But her husband's estate is when this fund began, and that was only about 4 or 5 years ago. So it doesn't necessarily take a decade for a fund to really start doing some tremendous good. And the Herbert Scholarship basically provides scholarships for students at either Central Methodist University in Fayette or St. Paul's School of Theology here in Kansas City.
My husband and I have this little dream that if we won the lottery, we want to set up a foundation. And with that, we're going to give lots of scholarships, a lot of endowments. But our rule is that we're going to go to our graves without anybody knowing we won the lottery, that we just want to be able to do this and be normal people. Well, the real joke in all of this is, as a Methodist pastor, I don't play the lottery. But we have this dream, and what I'm really hearing you say, though, is I don't need to win the lottery. I just need to have a plan. And if I have a plan, I can leave a legacy.
Exactly. And in fact, that donor advised fund we talked about, in many instances, can grow into that permanent endowment fund. In other words, it can be your donor advised fund as long as you want it to be, and then it can become a permanent endowment with a fixed purpose, whether that's for your local church, a scholarship fund, or whatever you might choose.
But the key is to have that plan.
Correct. But it can, your gifts then into it grow over time.
But if I just keep talking about it, nothing's going to happen, folks. I've got to have that plan. And that's what we're talking about today, is putting that plan together. So people need to start with thinking this through, having some conversations, and then also, making that appointment to go visit their attorney, making those meetings and showing up and doing it and following it through. As the attorney told me, he goes, number of people that I give them the information, they sign it and they put it in their desk, and that doesn't do any good. It needs to be filed. So we have to have these plans. Tell me about some plans that can make a difference. Some bequests, some beneficiary designations. What are some plans that people have done?
Well, the other thing about some of these gift ideas is that they don't have to necessarily be disruptive to the estate plan that you've put in place. For instance, let's say you've set up your will. You can still make a beneficiary designation on a particular asset to do a particular thing, and that will just not be part of your estate. That will be handled in that way. In terms of how one goes about naming a bequest in either a will document or a trust document. It's very simple language. It's simply, I leave a bequest to my church, and it can be a percentage of your estate, for instance, 10%, a tithe of your estate, or it can be a particular asset. In terms of setting up a fund at the foundation, an arrangement that we often will work with people to do is we will draft a memorandum of understanding. It's really not a legally binding document. It's just an administrative document that when their estate is processed and their intended estate gift comes to the foundation, this is how they want it to be administered. And so we basically keep that document on file. The will or trust document will simply say, I want 10% of the remainder of my estate to go to the Missouri United Methodist Foundation to be administered in keeping with the memorandum we signed on such and such a date. Well, that is all that document needs to say, and then the foundation document is easily amended as different ideas occur to the donor. So.
Right, so as the foundation, there are ways that we can help, ways
Correct.
that we can guide people through it, and we are here to do that. And all the Methodists out there, whether you are in Methodist, as in you've attended a few times to Methodist Church, you were born and raised Methodist, you like the Methodist Church, it does not matter. It does not have to be a membership rule. We are here for the people, and again, we are Christians leading Christians through this process. Well, as we get near our end here, what type of life income gifts might there be for folks?
Well, we'll just touch very briefly on this, and again, we've got a nice little brochure on this topic, but another gift arrangement that might not be quite as familiar to a lot of folks, there are ways to make a current gift that essentially lock in a fixed income stream for life for one person or two people. A married couple, and then at your death, the remainder value of that gift arrangement goes to your church or wherever you've directed it. The most common and most easily set up version of this is called a charitable gift annuity. And a charitable gift annuity is part annuity and part gift, as its name implies.
That's a really good term for it then.
Yeah.
Share with a little bit about that. Can you use an example of somebody who has done that and what that has looked like?
Well, essentially, if a person, the brochure has a sampling of gift annuity rates. If someone really wants to check this out thoroughly, just give us a call and we'll produce a detailed illustration because the gift annuity rates key off the age of the giver when they set it up. And once it's set up, it's a fixed amount as long as they live. And the rates are set by the American Council on Gift Annuities, which most major charities follow, and so it can be a particularly attractive, again, planning tool for folks, typically folks 65 and older, who are interested in some fixed income, interested in a gift to their church. This can be a good solution.
As a pastor, I've had so many people tell me throughout their life, I wish I could give more, I wish I could do this, and yet they're trying to plan for the future at the same time. I hope what you're hearing is your giving doesn't always have to happen here in the now and in the moment, but it happens in that plan. And there's ways to bless your church and bless your families and bless your favorite charities for a very long time. And again, that might be the final and best gift you can give. David, in all this conversation we've had today, there's a scripture that keeps coming to my mind, and it's one that we often talk about when we're together, which is, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be, which comes from Matthew. Mm-hmm. And I tell David this is the dyslexic scripture, because sometimes it says that where your treasure is, your heart will be, but it could be easily to flip that around and say where your heart is, your treasure is. And people often will turn that around and get it confused. But here's the point that I think all of us really need to remember. Treasure and heart always go together. Mm-hmm. And I think of where do we pour our money? Where, when we are done in this earth, will people look around and think, what was important to each of us? I think I told you the story that when our kids were little, somebody told me that what you have in your living room, when somebody walks in your front door, and what they see will reflect what's important in your family. And I kind of panicked on that. I thought, what do people see? Because are they going to see, a great big screen TV is important to us, and that's what's right here? Or are they going to see books and toys and games when my kids were little, and that's what was important to us, that we spend that time with them? And I made that decision that day that we were not going to have a TV in our living room, because instead I wanted our living room to reflect who we are. And in fact, over time, that took on art of lighthouses and sailboats, because that's our favorite place on earth, is in Michigan, where we go sailing and there's lighthouses. That somebody would know that about us, it would reflect it. And so when somebody at the end of my life, I hope they can look back and see what was important by how I left things. And I think that's what you've experienced with so many clients over the years. And that's what we want for all of you, is people to be able to see what was important to you by how your treasure and your heart came together and left a lasting impact, a legacy. So that is a scripture that you might want to spend some time and meditate on and think about that. And that's where we would really like people to start, is in that prayer and in that meditation of what will lead for them next.
Very well said.
Well, as we get ready to conclude things here, any last things that you want to make sure, if they walk away with nothing else tonight, what's the one thing you want them to remember and walk away with?
Oh, gosh. Well, I guess in this day and age, look us up on the internet. The foundation website has a lot of information geared to inform you about these topics. And also, our phone number is there. And if you'd rather talk to a real person, call us anytime.
And if you want to, you can email us as well. Again, that website is mumf.org. Missouri United Methodist Foundation is all you need to Google. You could get to that. Also, here at the church, they're willing to have conversations with you. And I've had a delightful time chatting with Pastor Chris. And he and I have talked about how not only is it important to have these conversations about your funding, but also about what might be important to you in a celebration of life or in a service at the time of death. And he is very open to having those kind of conversations where, like, what hymns do you want? Who do you want to speak? What's important to you in a service like that? So know that your church, your pastor, is willing to walk this journey with you as well. And also remember, they've got all these great brochures. Folks, just call up. They'll have them ready for you. You can swing by and pick them up. But on that, thank you, David, for the time tonight. And thank you to Aldersgate United Methodist Church for having us and to be able to open up this conversation that's near and dear to us, but hopefully will be life-changing for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.